Well, good afternoon, and I want to welcome everybody here today and welcome to the Standing Committee of Crown and Central Agencies. I'm Fred Bradshaw, I'm the chair. We have Warren Keating substituting for Stephen Bonk today. We also have Ken Shettle-Dayoff, Greg Lawrence, Tim McLeod, and Doug Steele. And substituting for Nathaniel Teed, we have Jennifer Bowes. Pursuant to Rule Number 148.1, the following estimates and supplementary estimates number 2 were committed to the Standing Committee on Crown and Central Agencies on March 30th, 2023, and March 22nd, 2023, respectively. The 23-24 estimates are Vote 18, Finance, Vote 12, Finance Debt Servicing, Vote 33, Public Service Commission, Vote 13, SAS Builds and Procurement, Vote 86, SAS Builds Corporation, Vote 155, Lotteries and Gaming Saskatchewan Corporation, Vote 151, Municipal Financing Corporation of Saskatchewan, Vote 152, Saskatchewan Power Corporation, Vote 153, Saskatchewan Telecommunications Holding Corporation, Vote 140, Saskatchewan Water Corporation, Vote 150, Sask Energy Incorporated, Vote 175, Debt Redemption, Vote 176, Sinking Fund Payments, Government Share, and Vote 177, Interest on Gross Debt, Crown Enterprise Share. And the 2022-23 supplementary estimates number 2 is Vote 18, Finance, Vote 12, Finance Debt Servicing, Vote 152, Saskatchewan Power Corporation, Vote 153, Saskatchewan Telecommunications Holding Corporation. And today we will be considering the estimates of Vote 33, Public Service Commission, Vote 13, SAS Builds and Procurement, Vote 86, SAS Builds Corporation, and vote number 124. Or bill, excuse me, sorry about that, just got corrected. Bill number 124. We'll begin with consideration of Vote 33, Public Service Commission, Central Management and Services, subvote PS01. Minister Carr is here with her officials. As a reminder to the officials, please state your name for Hansard before speaking, and don't touch the microphones. And the Hansard operator will turn on your microphone when you're speaking to the committee. Minister, do you want to please introduce your officials and make your opening comments?
I will. Well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here today to provide additional information on the estimates for the Public Service Commission. And with me today, I have my chief at the back of the room, Sean Wilson. We have Catherine Pollock, chair of the PSC, Pat Buchik, assistant chair of the PSC, Claudia Burke, assistant chair of the PSC, Josh Frystad, executive director of corporate services, Carolyn Lewis, executive director of Human Resource Service Center, and Laura Hunter, executive director of the talent branch. And any other ministry officials are standing by just in case. The Public Service Commission, or the PSC, is a central agency for government, providing human resource services for executive government, as well as some agencies, boards, and commissions. We enable ministries to have the right people in the right roles at the right time to ensure government can deliver on its goals. Currently, there are more than 11,000 employees who work for the Government of Saskatchewan. The employees work in various roles all over the province. As a central agency of government, the PSC provides strategic support for labor relations, organizational development, employee recruitment and development, compensation, classification, diversity and inclusion, and health and safety. It also supports foundational services, including payroll, benefits, and collective bargaining. We have human resource business partner teams embedded within ministries to serve their HR needs. These teams bring HR expertise and perspective to specific ministry initiatives. This approach recognizes the unique business of each ministry and ensures that their HR professionals are fully integrated in their businesses, which helps them provide strategic HR decisions. PSC employees provide strategic support, outstanding service, and are deeply respected as valuable partners to ministry clients. The PSC's plan for 23-24 is consistent with previous years. The 5 areas of strategic priority remain the same, and they are effective leadership, high-performing organization, inclusive workplace, health, safety, and wellness, as well as PSC being engaged and high-performing. We believe we have captured the strategic HR priorities of government in these areas. PSC's plan is aligned with the growth plan to ensure government has the workforce needed to deliver on provincial priorities to meet the needs of its citizens. The plan also supports the Deputy Minister to the Premier's priorities for the public service, which are building strong teams, communication and collaboration, employee development, accountability, managing performance, and mental health and well-being. Our first area of focus, effective leadership, is about ensuring the Government of Saskatchewan has the leadership required to deliver on our commitments. Effective leaders provide clarity of purpose, inspire and engage employees to be the best, and deliver on the government's goals safely and effectively. This includes proactive and targeted recruitment of strong leaders and ensuring senior leaders are supported and well-positioned to achieve our goals. The PSC has a number of tools and training in place to build strong teams and leaders, such as the practice of an effective executive team framework, middle manager excellence, and leadership development programs. The second area of focus is a high-performing organization. High-performing organizations become this way by design and not by default. This includes proactive and targeted recruitment for pivotal and hard-to-recruit positions, implementing the multi-year learning and development strategy for government, ensuring managers have the resources, tools, and supports to be effective in their roles. We will continue to build on our corporate culture, guided by our commitment to excellence and core values. The goal is to have engaged and productive employees who are valued and appreciated. The third strategic goal is building an inclusive workforce. We know that having a diverse workforce and inclusive workplaces make us a better public service. It allows us to better understand and meet the needs of our citizens. The fourth area of focus is our plan is health, safety, and wellness. In order to have productive employees, you must have healthy employees, both physically and mentally. PSC being engaged and high-performing is our fifth area, and it focuses on PSC's work. This includes enhancing our one-team approach to client service, culture, and decision-making, ensuring that the PSC has the workforce we need to successfully execute our plan. In the past year, PSC has made significant progress on many of our plan initiatives. Inclusion and diversity continue to be top of priority for government. We are working to improve diversity hiring and retention. The growth plan sets out a priority for hiring students with disabilities. In 2022, the summer student program introduced specific focus on hiring students with disabilities. The program saw a 63% increase in applications from students with a disability and a 152% increase in hires from this diversity group. This year, the summer student program continues to focus on students with disabilities, as it also is putting a priority on hiring Indigenous and visible minority students. The Government of Saskatchewan is also committed to reconciliation by building a workforce that is representative of the Indigenous people of our province. Across government, ministries are also taking steps to support diversity and inclusion. 10 ministries now employ senior Indigenous advisors including the PSC. These advisors sit at ministry executive tables and ensure an Indigenous perspective is included in executive decisions. 3 ministries have also hired Indigenous advisors. The PSC continues to strengthen relationships with educational and community-based organizations to identify and attract Indigenous talent. In response to recommendation number 57 of the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action, government offers mandatory Indigenous awareness training to employees. To date, more than 7,000 employees have completed this training. Along with the mandatory Indigenous awareness training, there is more in-depth training for employees in ministries such as health, social services, and corrections, policing, and public safety. Many ministries are also making 4 seasons of reconciliation training available to their employees. We continue to implement the government's multi-year inclusion strategy and action plan to help build a more diverse workforce. In 2022, the PSC, in partnership with a cross-ministry working group, launched a set of guidelines to support employees who are transgender and gender diverse as they transition to their authentic selves in the workplace. These guidelines also provide tools for managers and co-workers to support transgender or gender diverse employees in the workplace. Launching these guidelines is another step to ensure our workplaces are inclusive and supportive. There is also a robust inclusion toolkit available for employees and managers. This toolkit provides practical tools for managers to help them develop an inclusive workplace and hire a diverse workforce. In addition to the toolkit, PSC has a government-wide inclusion community of practice. This group is made up of leaders from each ministry's inclusion committee. These employees are dedicated to leading inclusion work within their ministries. They come together to share information and inform inclusion priorities across government. We are working on improving our diversity representation numbers. An important part of this is our self-declaration online portal to allow employees to self-declare in a diversity category at any time during their employment. This initiative is helping us more accurately reflect our diversity of numbers and allows diverse employees to self-identify for training and development opportunities. The provincial auditor found that the PSC was effective in advancing diversity and inclusion, but did make some recommendations for improvement. In response, PSC is undertaking several actions to continue applying inclusion principles to human resource policies, programs, and services. PSC supports the government-wide employee networks that support diversity and inclusion. We also celebrate inclusion-related events such as Indigenous History Month, Pride Month, Orange Shirt Day, Black Canadian History Month, through corporate communication and ministry events. These initiatives, along with several other training and learning initiatives, are helping to increase the government's diversity representation. The overall government representation of diversity group members remained relatively steady in 2022. Although we are still behind most of the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission's targets, we are improving. PSC is investing in health, safety, and wellness of employees. PSC supports the government-wide employee and family assistance program that provides counseling and resources and 24/7 service availability. It also provides support and resources for managers to help them create psychologically safe workplaces. The mental and physical health of employees continues to be high priority for government. We're also working on making improvements to our technology. Technology not only improves processes, but it also allows for better information that is more accurate and available quicker, which also allows for better decision-making. SAS Builds and Procurement is leading this project and have partnered with PSC and the Ministries of Finance, Highways, and Corrections, Policing, and Public Safety on this project. This new system will increase efficiency, generate financial savings, and drive better business outcomes and evidence-based decision-making. This project will move all of government's critical business processes into a cloud-based, world-class system, giving the government one source for information and a consistent user experience for employees and the public. This project is well underway and it is expected to go live in 2024. The focus of PSC for 23-24 is to continue to progress on its plan. We develop a budget allowed us to focus on our priorities. In order to achieve its goals, the Government of Saskatchewan needs the strategic advice and guidance of the PSC to ensure we have the right people with the right skills, delivering the right programs and services to the citizens of Saskatchewan. I am proud of the PSC's accomplishments and confident in the work that is planned for the coming year. The PSC's work helps ministries so they can meet their goals of building stronger communities and growing a stronger Saskatchewan. So with that, thank you, and I would welcome any questions, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Minister, for that. Are there any questions? Ms. Bowles?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the Minister and her officials for being here. It's my first time here for PSC estimates, and so looking forward to learning more through this process. So thank you to the Minister for your opening remarks. I think we'll move straight into it, Mr. Chair, into the questioning. I want to start off, while I do have some questions just stemming from your opening remarks that maybe I'll just hit off the top here. You had talked about, sorry, I just want to find this here. You talked about the provincial auditor's recommendations and the fact that the PSC is making changes based on those recommendations. And I was curious to know which of those recommendations the PSC will be acting on.
Well, thank you very much for that question, and I'm happy to highlight exactly what the recommendations were and kind of where we're at with those. So the provincial auditor's recommendations and the actions that the public service is taking is as follows. Modernization of the employment equity policy. So PSC is refreshing the employment equity policy in alignment with current practices with expected delivery in the 23-24 year that we're going into. The next recommendation was to create clear indicators and timeframes for measuring progress. So PSC is establishing short, medium, and long-term goals with measures and indicators of progress in equity, diversity, and inclusion. Expand the inclusion toolkit for employees was another one. PSC is updating and enhancing the inclusion toolkit content and refreshing resources on a regular basis. And I think that that's maybe something I would just add, probably with all of these recommendations, is that as times change, we need to modernize our policies and our toolkits as we go along, which is what we are committed to doing. The next recommendation was to monitor ministry equity, diversity, and inclusion plans and reports on their progresses. So PSC has formalized a process to gather, monitor, and report progress on the ministry's plans and analyze any themes that come out of that. The next recommendation was to improve data analysis of diversity statistics. So PSC is enhancing use of data to assess initiatives and diversity representation to inform recruitment and retention talent strategies. Once implemented, the new Oracle Human Capital Management System will allow for more effective analytics and the ability to identify trends and patterns. And the last recommendation was to provide public reporting to show accountability and commitment. And PSC is exploring the options for the public reporting piece of that. I would add that in the provincial auditor's report, she did find that PSC did have effective processes to advance equity, equity, diversity, and inclusion regarding the collective and reliable data about persons in designated groups, collaboration with key partners, appropriate cross-ministry goals, and training opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much. And in terms of public reporting improvements, what does that exploration look like through the PSC?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, in terms of the public reporting improvements as one of the recommendations, what specifically is the PSC exploring in relation to that recommendation?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes, but I think the most important thing that's coming out of this public reporting improvement is that as we're establishing our progress and we're meeting our goals put forward by the Human Rights Commission, that in the upcoming year, we will be publicly reporting in the annual report. So it'll be very, very transparent exactly where we're at with all of with the goals as far as diversity inclusion.
Okay, thank you. And so, as I understand it, then there aren't any recommendations that were made that the PSC will not be acting on.
That's correct. We're going to be acting on them all. Some of them may take a little bit longer than others, a work in progress. And I think, as I mentioned earlier with all of these, probably that continual lens of, are things changing? Do we need to adjust the toolkit? All of that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. Just skipping back to, I think, one of your earlier opening remarks about guidelines in place for trans employees who are transitioning. Would you be able to provide a copy of those guidelines? Okay, great.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. And then I think there was just a few more. You had said that the PSC has still not reached the Human Rights Commission's targets, and how behind exactly is the PSC on those targets?
Okay, great, thank you. So, regarding your question, representation and diversity groups have been relatively stable in the government of Saskatchewan, but does lag the Human Rights Commission's goals. A multi-year inclusion strategy was launched in 2017-18 and updated in December of 2021. An annually refreshed inclusion action plan enables Government of Saskatchewan to move forward on initiatives and priorities supporting improved recruitment and retention of employees who are members of diverse groups. Government of Saskatchewan is taking a more proactive and targeted recruitment approach, which includes strengthening relationships with educational institutions and community-based organizations. Ministries have established committees to help develop a more inclusive workplace culture, and several ministries, including the Public Service Commission, have appointed people to senior Indigenous advisor roles to lead internal and external engagement and to provide advice on ministry strategies, policies, programs, and partnerships that will lead to improving Indigenous outcomes in Saskatchewan. So as far as the goals set forward by the Human Rights Commission for persons with disabilities, the target is 22.2%, and we are at 3.6%. Aboriginal people, target is 14%, we are at 8.9%. Members of a visible minority group, the target is 10.6%, and we are at 7.9%. And women in underrepresented occupations, so women in senior management, the target is 47%, and we are actually at 49.7%, so we do well in that category, as well as women in middle and other management. The target is 47%, and we are at 56.4%, so we do really well in that category as well. And I think as we work with our stakeholders and our advisors, we expect to be bringing all of those other numbers up as time goes on.
Okay, and so can I ask, since the multi-year inclusion strategy was implemented in 17-18 to the time that it was updated in 2021, what types of updates were made to try and, bridge those gaps and to achieve those targets?
Okay, so as far as the work that has been taking place, an annually refreshed inclusion action plan enables the Government of Saskatchewan to move forward on initiatives and priorities supporting improved recruitment and retention of employees who are members of a diversity group. Diversity and inclusion initiatives and priorities include collaboration with ministries to continue to embed and improve the inclusion toolkit, rollout and support of the new gender transition guidelines for employees and managers across all ministries, support to diversity group employee networks that promote awareness and provide education and networking through organized events such as Aboriginal Government Employees Network, Saskatchewan Visible Minority Employees Association, Disability Support Network, and Pride Alliance Network. A self-declaration option implemented in 2018 provides more opportunities to self-declare, leading to increased opportunities for targeted training and employment. Delivery of respect in the workplace training. So as of December 31st, 2022, 18,895 Government of Saskatchewan employees, past and present, have completed the training. Delivery of Indigenous awareness training. As of December 31st, 2022, 7,656 Government of Saskatchewan employees have completed this training. Delivery of disability awareness training. So as of December 31st, 2022, 4,474 Government of Saskatchewan employees have completed this training. And of course, every year we will update those numbers, encourage all of our employees to get all of that training under their belt. Renewal of the equity policy for the Government of Saskatchewan and supporting Saskatchewan accessibility legislation and its impacts. The Be at Work program provides managers with supports for proactive and effective medical accommodation practices and enables employees to remain safely at work or promotes an earlier return to work. Healthy Workplaces initiatives, implementation of the national standard for psychological health and safety in the workplace, guidelines and resources intended to help promote psychological well-being of employees and prevent psychological harm in the workplace. In 2022, Summer Student Program priority on hiring students experiencing a disability, focusing on candidate and ministry engagement. This resulted in the 63.1% increase in student applications and 152.4% increase in hires of this equity group, which I talked about in my opening comments. Ministries have hosted inclusion-related events and learning opportunities, such as traditional Indigenous ceremonies, such as pipe ceremonies, medicine walks, and sweats. Speakers, elders, and facilitators teaching about the history of colonization, impact of residential schools, and the importance of reconciliation. Additional virtual training, such as the 4 Seasons of Reconciliation by First Nations University of Canada, celebration of the National Indigenous History Month, Indigenous Storytelling, Indigenous Peoples Day, Orange Shirt Day, and the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, as well as support for pride events, parades, and presentations on 2 SLGBTQ+ topics. So that is the work that we've added from the beginning to where we are now, and of course, this is a continual moving, shifting sands as we move forward and we continue to improve.
Okay, thank you. And so will the effects of these efforts be assessed on a regular basis, and if so, on what sort of interval?
So internally, as we do all of this work, we assess it quarterly to see exactly where we are at. And of course, then we have that annual reporting that will be happening in our report.
Okay, thank you. I did have a question too about, Sorry, just one sec. You had spoken about Indigenous advisors being put in place in certain ministries, and which ministries all have Indigenous advisors in place currently?
Okay, well, thank you for that. So I think your question was which ministries have the Indigenous advisors? So we have agriculture, energy and resources, advanced education, parks, culture and sport, education, corrections, policing and public safety, justice and attorney general, SAS Bills and Procurement, and of course, our ministry, Public Service Commission.
Okay, thank you. And did I understand correctly that the intention is to have an Indigenous advisor in each ministry across government?
Thank you for the question. So right now, the ministries, I guess we'll decide when it is time for them to have senior Indigenous advisor. Having said that, we do have this council of senior Indigenous advisors at this point in time, and that is a group of advisors that really any ministry can, if they have questions or concerns, they can call on them for advice. And within the Public Service Commission, we have our senior Indigenous advisor who is available at all times to whatever ministry may need some advice at that point in time.
Okay, thank you. And so I guess a question there is, how are the Indigenous advisors selected? Is it each ministry that selects their own? And as I understand it, each ministry has the prerogative whether they will have an Indigenous advisor in place or not? Yeah, and each does select their own.
thank you. So, as we already talked about, it's up to the ministries, and it actually is a competitive process, application-based, and depending what they're looking for determines whether they get the job or not. But I'm just going to let Pat touch on it a little bit further, kind of to expand what that might look like.
Great, thank you, and thanks for the question. So just in terms of the requirements for those, can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry, Pat Buckich, Assistant Chair. So just in terms of that competitive process mentioned by the minister, that will depend on the specific needs of the ministry and what they're looking to achieve through their senior Indigenous advisor. For example, education and agriculture ministries are quite externally and sector focused. Some ministries focus more on engagement, and perhaps others have more of a policy internal development lens.
Okay, yep, thank you. And what was the impetus and where did the decision stem from to bring in Indigenous advisors through different ministries in the government?
So we're not exactly sure when the first senior Indigenous advisor was hired. We can get that information if necessary, but education is the ministry that hired the first senior Indigenous advisor. And as other ministries watched how that rolled out and the successes that they were having, that's when they made decisions to start doing that within their own ministries. And so that's why you see the ministries that have it at this current point in time.
Okay, thanks. And then I was just wondering a bit about one of your answers about the government's Indigenous Council, and I've never heard of this before, and I was wondering if you could let me know a bit about how that council is selected and what mandate the council has.
Okay, so I guess first and foremost, the purpose of the Senior Indigenous Advisors Council will collaborate to support the work of their ministries and will share their expertise with other areas within the government of Saskatchewan as needed. The goals and objectives is to have a council where senior Indigenous advisors respect diverse viewpoints, share leading practices, ideas, experiences, influencing positive change, and resource related to provincial direction to ensure Indigenous culture and protocols are respected, supported, and integrated into ministry initiatives in a consistent manner, providing strategic advice, expertise, and a standardized approach on Indigenous policy and program development and implementation within respective ministries and across the Government of Saskatchewan, building relationships, engaging and partnering with Indigenous communities to ensure their perspectives and voices are integrated into the policies, programs, and services of the ministries respective to the senior Indigenous advisors and other areas of the Government of Saskatchewan as requested or invited, and to leverage each other's knowledge and resources. As far as the membership goes, a person holding a position with which was posted as a senior Indigenous advisor in the ministry, having the lived experience of being Indigenous, reporting directly to the Deputy Minister's office, having oversight and providing an Indigenous lens to all branch and ministry policies, programs, and initiatives. So this council is made up of all of the senior Indigenous advisors. Their roles and responsibilities are to represent respective ministries, rotate hosting and chairing duties, as well as taking minutes, be fully participating members, and contribute to discussion around happenings. Are there current events impacting SIA's work, and if so, how? Highlights, what are SIA's working on, main priorities, projects, and making sure that it has an Indigenous lens. Are there any hurdles that they're experiencing? And putting an Indigenous lens on that. And hope, what are some of the opportunities and how can senior Indigenous advisors support and collaborate? And then, of course, to provide updates from the meetings to respective ministries, senior leadership, teams, and other appropriate internal staff or committees to further the work and share ideas from the meetings. And of course, strategic direction, priorities, and outcomes with respective to deputy ministers in general.
Great, thank you. Not sure if you'd know the timeline for this, but would you happen to know if the Indigenous advisor within the Ministry of Justice was in place prior to the introduction of Bill 88, the Saskatchewan First Act, or was that after the bill was introduced?
Thank you for the question. That is not something that we have, but that would definitely be something that the Ministry of Justice would be able to answer for you.
Okay. And can you tell me, are you aware if the Ministry of Government Relations will be seeking an Indigenous advisor?
So just regarding if they're going to be hiring one, that's something that I can't answer. It would be a question that you would have to ask them. But I do know from what I can recall in my time in government relations, they did have a division that was Indigenous that they definitely drew on advice from. So, but once again, government relations is really the place for those questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I think for now, that's the questions I have from your remarks. I really appreciate that. That was very instructive. I think I'll move on to some of my pre-planned questions and have a few around bargaining. I'm wondering if you can let us know which agencies the PSC bargains on behalf of. A list of you.
Repeat that?
Yes, wondering which agencies does the PSC all bargain on behalf of?
Okay, so we do have a number of bargaining tables that we bargain on behalf of, and there is PSC SGEU, PSC QP 600, Sask Arts, SGEU, Sask Crop Insurance, SGEU, Connexus Arts Center, IATSE, Connexus Arts Center, RWDSU, Legal Aid Commission, CUPE, and Water Security Agency, Unifor Local 820.
Okay, thanks. And have there been any changes in the list of agencies that the PSC represents over the past 5 years?
So the list that I provided you is the consistent list that we have had, but I will let Pat just touch briefly on, I guess, some of the anomalies that have happened in the past, just because of PSC really is a supportive ministry across government, so.
Yeah, Pat Buckich, Assistant Chair. So from time to time, if there's capacity issues in other organizations around the ELR file and bargaining, the Public Service Commission is asked to provide support and assistance to bargaining, either directly at the table or from a strategy development perspective. And an example that comes to mind several years ago was the Sask Human Rights Commission needed some support given capacity at that time.
Okay, thank you. Wondering, Minister, what your role is with respect to collective bargaining?
So as a Minister of PSC, it is my role to confirm the mandate for PSC. And then I'm also a member of the Subcommittee of Public Sector Bargaining, which will make that recommendation to Cabinet.
Okay, thank you. And can you tell me what is the status currently for bargaining for all public service commission agreements with the agencies?
Okay, so currently, we have two tables that we're actively negotiating with, the QP agreement and the SGEU agreement with the PSC. So we are committed to the collective bargaining process and are confident that a mutually acceptable settlement will be reached at these bargaining tables. As well, I guess just to the broader question of the status of the different collective bargaining tables, although we're not actively negotiating with them right now, the Sask Arts SGEU did expire on September 30th, 2022. Sask Crop Insurance SGEU expired September 30th, 2022. Connexus Arts Center IATSE expired June 30th, 2022. Connexus Arts Center RWDSU expired January 26th, 2023. Legal Aid Commission QP September 30th, 2021. And so the only table on there that hasn't expired, but will later this year, is the Water Security Agency, Unit 4 Local 820, December 31st, 2023. And I guess just for the two tables that we're negotiating with right now, the PSC QP 600, it expired September 30th, 21, and PSC SGEU expired September 30th, 2022.
Okay, thank you. So I guess based on your answers, the remaining tables that are not active, all of which have expired except, as you mentioned, the Water Security Agency. And so can you let us know the reason why those bargaining tables have not commenced?
So the parties will actually determine when they are ready to start bargaining. So for example, I was just informed that we do have notice from legal aid that they're going to start tomorrow.
And is the Public Service Commission the reason for any of the delays with the bargaining commencing for the expired agreements that you mentioned?
So thank you for the question. As I mentioned in my previous answer, when the parties determine they're ready is when they will come forward. And then at that point in time, the PSLC will become an active participant. So I guess the short answer is no, we're not responsible for any of the delays.
Thanks. And then I guess there would be only 2 agreements where there's been an exchange of proposals, presumably the 2 active tables. So for those tables, what is the minister's perspective on how far apart the parties are, and what are your expectations for resolution at those tables?
Well, I think I would just answer that question with active bargaining it happens, and we're not going to talk about it in a committee or on the floor of the Assembly.
Okay. Okay, and I think now, just moving on a little bit away from bargaining, I had mentioned earlier, a bit new to Public Service Commission and the estimates, and so had a few questions about governance. I was wondering, in terms of governance, why the PSC would have a chair as opposed to a deputy minister? What's the reason for the difference in structure there?
Thank you for the question. So unlike most statutes that create government ministries, the Public Service Commission Act 1988, with two exceptions, does not contemplate any legal role whatsoever for the minister responsible for the PSC. The minister has general responsibility for the PSC, including responsibility for answering questions in the Legislative Assembly with respect to personal transactions and other duties carried out by the chair and the PSC, giving direction to the chair with respect to financial and budget matters, and discussing in a very general or macro way the personal policies and practices of the PSC. The minister's legal authority is limited to giving direction to the PSC and carrying out its statutory duties with respect to collective bargaining with trade unions representing government employees. But I am going to pass it over to Catherine, and she'll talk a little bit more about her specific role.
Catherine Pollock, Chair. So I would just add that the structure of the Public Service Commission is a really foundational aspect of the Westminster model of government, which ensures an independent and continued professional public service, regardless of what party is in power. And so thus the difference in terms of the minister's role, but then also a chair versus a deputy minister. So the role of the chair actually has quite a bit more decision-making authority than a deputy minister in some regards.
And then I guess stemming from that, could you speak a bit more about the role of the PSC board?
Okay, thank you for your question. So the role of the Public Service Commissioners. They are appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and Council and are responsible to effectively carry out the provisions of the Public Service Act of 1998. Commissioners have all the powers of the commissioners appointed pursuant to the Public Inquiries Act, including the powers to administer oaths and declarations, to subpoena witnesses, and to compel the production of books, papers, and records. The chair and other commissioners have exclusive statutory duties respecting all human resource matters laid out in the Act. And the role of the chair. The chair is responsible for providing direction, advice, or assistance to ministries in the application of HR management policies, standards, regulations, and procedures, developing, providing, assisting in, or coordinating program concerning employee training, education, and career development, establishing and maintaining an HR management information system, and fulfilling any other responsibilities that the Lieutenant Governor and Council may assign. The commissioners delegated to the chair powers like recruiting and selecting persons within the public service and appointing persons in classified divisions, developing, establishing, and maintaining classification plans, coordinating and development and implementation of employment equity policies and programs, and carrying out research to compensation and working conditions within the public service. And I'm just going to turn it over to Catherine, and she'll give you some examples.
So I'll just share a couple of practical examples of what the commissioners do. So on the one hand, they are very much, in terms of their decision-making, are responsible for out-of-scope appeals. So out-of-scope employees who are facing a decision that they wish to appeal, those are heard by the commissioners. And then the other element of the ongoing work of the commissioners is to meet monthly with the chair and assistant chairs to almost act like a sounding board, a bit of an advisory board in terms of our direction at that sort of 10,000-foot level. So we seek their advice in terms of things that we're moving forward and take their input there.
Thank you. And wondering if you can tell me when the current board members were appointed and if there are currently any vacancies.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So the board consists of 5 people, Catherine and 4 other individuals. And the terms of this board are 6 years, and we have 2 people who are actually in their second term. We have 2 people who are in their first term, and at this current point in time, we have no vacancies.
Okay. So are there term limits?
Okay, thank you for the question once again. As far as we can see, there are no term limits.
Okay. Thanks. I did want to just come back to one of your responses, Ms. Pollock. You had talked about the board receiving out-of-scope appeals, and I'm wondering I'm assuming that's for dismissal, suspension, demotion, layoff. I'm wondering how many of each of those appeals were heard, say, in the last 5 years, and what were the outcomes of those appeals?
So once again, thank you very much for the question, and I'm just going to turn this over to Catherine as the chair of the board.
So we don't have the number of appeals over the past 5 years. That is data that we can get to you if you desire. In terms of sharing the outcomes of those appeals, that information is confidential, and so we don't broadly share information around the decisions. So those are specific to the employee and the employer. In terms of the types of appeals, I would just add that there are also classification appeals and even disciplinary in terms of a letter. So it goes beyond the scope of just terminations and demotions.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. And when I asked for outcomes, I didn't mean specifics. I meant outcomes in terms of, whether decisions were upheld or overturned. Yeah, which I assume wouldn't be confidential. Is that the case?
Yeah, we will endeavor to get that number for you, and what we can provide, we'll provide.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. I'm going to move on here now a little bit to executive appointments. Does the PSC ensure that executive appointments are based on merit, and if so, how is this ensured?
Once again, thank you for the question. So the hiring process that I'm going to talk about here within the government of Saskatchewan is up to and including ADMs. So hiring qualified employees is one of the most important decisions that organizations make. The government of Saskatchewan supports a nonpartisan and professional public service using consistent, fair, and defensible hiring practices. The Public Service Commission is responsible for the development of hiring tools and systems and works with managers to make good hiring decisions. The Public Service Commission also monitors staffing actions, supports the resolution of staffing grievances, and continues to improve hiring tools and processes. As far as authority and delegation goes, the Public Service Act sets the mandate for Public Service Commission to establish human resource practices to maintain a professional and independent public service. The PSC, as an independent agency, establishes qualifications and ensures that recruitment and staffing processes are in accordance with the Public Service Act of 1998, the Public Service Regulations of 1999, appropriate collective agreements, either SGEU or QP, and establish procedures and policies to ensure that the staffing process is fair, open, accessible, and that individuals are qualified for their positions. The PSC employs well-trained, experienced human resource professionals to help hiring managers with their staffing needs, provide legal and procedural frameworks within the ministries within which the ministries can carry out their staffing responsibilities, and ensures appropriate checks and balances are in place. Authority for staffing is delegated to the ministries. Delegated responsibilities include the development of job postings and interview guides, the administration of the hiring process, interviewing and conducting reference checks, making the selection decision, and any related grievance management. There's a little bit of a difference between in-scope unionized employees versus the out-of-scope staffing. So the permanent in-scope staffing process is conducted as per the appropriate collective agreement, either SGEU or QP. Appointment is based on their senior qualified model, except for some occupations at higher levels where merit-based provisions have been agreed to through collective bargaining. The SGEU has the right to representation at any staffing panel for permanent in-scope SGU competitions, and QP has the right to be present for all employment interviews for QP competitions. Permanent out-of-scope staffing is conducted in accordance with the Public Service Act 1998 and regulations, and appointment is based on merit and fit. There's also an online career center, so all permanent, full-time, and most part-time and non-permanent vacancies are advertised on a central site called the Career Center of Saskatchewan on saskatchewan.ca. So I'll just clarify that. Are advertised on a central site called the Career Center, and that can be found on saskatchewan.ca. Competitions open to the public may also be posted in newspapers, websites, and on social media such as LinkedIn or Indeed. Candidates register their employment interest and history. Recruiters can access this information in a timely fashion, a key factor for hard-to-recruit positions. Anyone who does not have access to a computer or the internet can get help and access they require at career services centers in their communities, immigration and career training, or at a local library. Candidates can also access a list of available competitions and apply through any smartphone. The system also supports non-electronic applications as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the information. I was asking exclusively about executive appointments. We've seen a number of people who have been recently appointed to the public service who have political connections. Has the Public Service Commission intervened at any point over the past 5 years to ensure the continuation of a professional, nonpartisan public service?
So I guess just to your question is if PSC has intervened in these, and no, they haven't.
Okay. Sorry, just one sec. I was skipping around here and lost my place. So are you aware how many individuals have moved from ministers' offices to the public service in each of the past 5 years?
I'm sorry, how many have moved from ministers' offices
Yeah.
to,
To the public service in each of the past 5 years?
okay, so thank you for the question. We do not track individuals who have moved from ministers' offices into the public service. And I guess just to add on that, even within the public service, we don't track employees who move from ministry to ministry. So if someone happened to be in the Ministry of Agriculture and then they go over to the Ministry of Social Services, we don't track those type of movements either.
Okay. I have a number of other questions along this line, but in the interest of time, I think I'm running a bit short here, so I might skip to another topic, maybe come back if I have time, or submit written questions. I wanted to come back to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Would you please provide your diversity statistics over the past 5 years, including women in executive management, Indigenous employees, employees with disabilities, and visible minorities? I know you gave current statistics, but could you list those for the previous 4 years as well?
Okay, so I will start with persons with disabilities. The target is 22.2%. So in 1920, we had 3.4%. In 2021, 3.5%. In 21-22, 3.7%. And in 22-23, now this is just as of December 31st, 2022, so we'll still have 3 more months of data that we will be gathering for this past fiscal year. It's 3.6%. And then we also have the category of Aboriginal people. And of course, the target is 14%. In 1920, we had 9.6%. In 2021, 9.5. In 21-22, 9.2. And then in 22-23 to December 31st, 22, we have 8.9%. Members of a visible minority, the goal is 10.6%. So in 1920, 5.7%, 2021, 6.6%, 21-22, 7.6%, and 22-23 as of December 31st, 2022, 7.9%. And then, of course, there was women in underrepresented occupations. So women in senior management, the target was 47%. In 1920, it was 47%. In 2021, it was 47.4%. In 21-22, it was 47.9%. And then in 22-23, of course, as of December 31st, 22, it was 49.7%. And also, that was in women in senior management. And then we have women in middle and other management. The target as well is 47%. In 1920, it was 55.2%. In 2021, it was 56.1%. In 21-22, it was 56.1%. And then in 22-23, as of December 31st, 22, it was 56.4%.
Okay, thank you. And those first stats, that was for employees with a disability, is that correct?
Yes, the first line item I gave you was persons with disabilities.
Okay. So just looking at these numbers, there hasn't been much significant change over the 5-year span by the looks of it with many of these categories at all. We've seen incremental changes in a few, probably the most notable being from 5.7% to 7.9% for employees who are visible minorities. And so can you comment on the lack of progress in achieving these targets over the past 5 years?
Okay, so thank you for the question once again. And I guess just when we talk about some of the line items and if we talk about the Indigenous component, at one time, we had several employees within our wildfire branch, which of course was eventually absorbed a couple, 3 years ago by the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency. And so some of those First Nations numbers or Indigenous component that we had are no longer within executive government because now they're over at the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency. So those numbers wouldn't actually be reported in here. Another component is when employees are hired, and I guess regardless of which category, disability or Indigenous component, it's something that they self-declare. And so it's that choice as to whether they're going to self-declare or they're not going to self-declare. And just to kind of build on that, some of the changes that were made in 2017. So in 2017, when Statistics Canada improved their methodology through making changes to the filter questions around activities of daily living, it's better captured disability types. So this actually increased the reported prevalence of disability from 12.4% to 22.2%. So at one time, people with disabilities, the standard was that 12.4%, but then in 2017, the criteria kind of changed. It became a bigger list, more inclusive, and it went up to 22.2%. So that is our new target. So the old they did that because they found that the old filters were not effective in capturing those experiencing less visible disabilities involving pain, memory, learning, and or mental illness. Increased prevalence of disability is largely related to improved coverage of all types of disabilities. There continues to be barriers to employment that government is working to address through initiatives such as focusing on increasing the number of students experiencing disability within our summer student program. And I guess just to touch on that, it gives a specific example of kind of what we are doing within government to help with that. So the PSC is actually connecting with post-secondary educational institutions to try and build relationships and promote the summer student program. This initiative is aimed at engaging through career fairs, the presentation with the University of Regina and Saskatchewan, First Nations University of Canada, Sask Polytechnique, Gabriel Dumont Institute, and the Saskatchewan Institute of Technologies. So that's career fairs at all of those institutions. Designated summer students opportunities for students at SIIT, and partnerships with student accessibility officers where available. So PSC has ongoing communication with ministries about the summer student program and available tools and resources to enable hiring from equity groups through social media, email blasts, and the onboarding process. And of course, PSC is actively promoting hiring for equity groups in social media, such as LinkedIn. This is just one specific example of what we're trying to boost those numbers and improve year after year.
Thank you. And so you talked about self-identification, and so specific to that, I'd like to know then, is that still the PSC's current practice to verify the status of prospective or current employees who claim to be Indigenous specifically?
So just before we get into answering that question, you had asked the question earlier about the appeals.
Hey, if you could get back to me, just because we only have 5 minutes and I have a few more questions I'm hoping to get to, if you could get back in writing on that, I would really appreciate that.
Fair enough. I will just pass this back. So the answer is yes then.
So yes to self-identification? Okay. So I think we've all seen the increasing awareness, the exposure, I guess, of non-Indigenous people in Saskatchewan who are fraudulently claiming to be Indigenous and who are in fact taking up positions that are supposed to be reserved for Indigenous people. And a lot of this awareness, I just want to give credit where credit's due, is on behalf of the Indigenous Women's Collective and the work that they've been doing in exposing this fraud. And so stemming from that, we've seen especially a number of post-secondary institutions who are taking steps to adapt and change, rework their policies to make sure that self-identification is not being relied on anymore, because we're seeing how problematic it is and how it's simply not working. And so I know my colleague Betty Nippy Albright, the opposition critic for First Nations and Métis relations, has proposed that the Public Service Commission implement attestation forms, which would be required to be signed by any employee who is claiming to be Indigenous, whether or not that position in question is a designated position for an Indigenous person. And so I know the Privacy Commissioner has stated that there are no privacy laws which would prevent the development of such a policy. And so I'd like to know, Minister, will you be looking to implement such a policy within the Public Service Commission?
Okay. Thank you for the question. So, Government of Saskatchewan is committed to reconciliation by building a workforce representative of Indigenous people in Saskatchewan. In executive government, proof of status for any self-declaration equity category is typically not requested. Misrepresentation is a complex issue, and we recognize the legitimate harm from fraudulent claims of Indigenous identity. There are different views within Indigenous community, both about being asked for proof and about what would constitute proof. The Public Service Commission will continue to monitor the issue in executive government and consider appropriate approaches to further explore of proof of identity in collaboration and consultation with Indigenous community. The current status right now, candidates who apply for jobs on the Government of Saskatchewan Career Centre are given the following message. If you're a member of an equity group, you are strongly encouraged to self-declare. And then it also states proof of status may be requested. Proof of status is typically not requested for any self-declaration equity category, but it could be. We will continue to support positive outcomes in hiring that will maintain current staffing practices while exploring alternative practices to validate identity. And I would like to stress very strongly that to date, we have had, within executive government, no known knowledge of anybody that is misrepresenting themselves. So once again, I would encourage that if there is a case that you're aware of, that you please bring that forward to us so it could be dealt with appropriately.
Okay, thank you for the response. And I would suggest that if this hasn't been broached, I guess already with your ministry's Indigenous advisor, that perhaps that would be something that would be good to explore. I think I may be out of time, Mr. Chair. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, well, thank you. I will turn it over to you for any closing remarks.
I'll just keep it very brief. Just thank you so much to all the officials who came today and supported me in my role. Thank you for the questions. I learned a little bit more today also, and thank you to the committee members for sitting here. And of course, Hansard.
Thank you again, Minister, and to your officials. It was really nice to meet you and good to learn a lot through this process. I really appreciate the time you take and the preparation that goes into the estimates, as always. It's very much valued. And to Hansard, thank you.
Okay, we will now adjourn the consideration of the estimates for the Public Service Commission, and we will recess until 5:45.